Nobody's in the live stream yet, so it doesn't look like I'm going to have anything going on. Though people might show up a little late, um, depending on if people show up. I don't know if you want me to go to the food store today or how long we can put it off. If it's really like you have the stuff that you need that it's more essential right now than me. Like I don't put milk in my coffee, so like it really comes down to like milk I can get from Costco. And like I said, I feel a lot safer going there. But it's the other stuff that you need. Like, are you out of cottage cheese? Yeah. We'll figure it out after this is done. I'm gonna hang out. I always give them 15 minutes, so I'm only 6 minutes in. So we'll see. The last one of the live streams on Monday, people started showing up at like 10 minutes in, so this might still end up when I'm holding. Hmm? English? Good morning. Do we not say morning? No. Well, good morning. I saw. I didn't realize I didn't say good morning. He was so busy talking to the barking dog this morning. You barking dog. How's your morning? I know you have the hardest life. Your parents are home every day with you now. Now you've got to the point where you're just like, please leave for a minute. You don't get to nap anymore, huh? Yeah, you don't get to nap like you used to. Oh, somebody stopped in. Sorry, gosh, I was talking to my dog. Uh, it should be the same grade. If it's not the same grade, let me know. It's just the one grade that you see is where you submitted it, and the other one is where the system is counting it towards your final grade. So the only reason it'll be an issue is if it's not the same grade. Then I copied it over wrong. But as long as they're the same grade, it's just that one was where you submitted it, and the other one's where the final grade is calculating it from. That's why then. It'll be the same thing for exam 3. You'll submit it through a link that I create later on after like the system's already set on how it's calculating your grade. So when I create something for you to drop to submit the an assignment in or an exam in or something like that, um, then I either have to completely redo the grade structure, which is what I did for personality since it was a brand new assignment. Um, but if I'm not going to redo the grade structure, I have to then I just copy it over into what I already have existing. If it ends up really confusing for anyone, I can switch that over. Um, but that's why it's there. It's just that the one that says exam 2 is where your grade is being calculated, and the Dropbox that you submitted, I think it said take home exam 2. That's just where you submitted the file. So I can do something with that, like erase the grade for where you submitted the file or something. Um, but the whole reason there is one is where you submit it, and one is where it's actually counting the grade for your for the course. Um, that's probably something to go over through email, Kasha. That's probably something we should do one on one really quick. So email me about that, and I'll take a look. If you have a 0 on one of the forms and not the other, it would be because you submitted replies you had to reply to 2 classmates, and I would say that you probably replied in the social forum to 2 classmates, but not in the memory one. But email me about that, and I'll go and take a look for you specifically. But that I wouldn't want to talk about with everyone in the class. So if you did submit them, let me know, and we'll go and take a look at it. Hi, Keith. Happy Earth Day. Um, if you did submit them, I'll go back in and take a look at them and see what happens. But that's probably why. Yeah, email me later, and I'll take a look. All right, so there's a couple of you here. The purpose of today was to really answer any questions that you might still have for the personality assignment. And there's only a couple of us here, so I'm not going to do the exact same talk lecture that I did on Monday, unless you guys need me to. I'd rather focus more on just answering questions for today on the personality assignment that you might have, because I can always link people who have the general questions. I can link them to the live stream for Monday. Or if you guys still do end up with general questions, then I'll end up going over those same things again. But the short version of what you're doing for this week, you have your list of 20 items, which seems from the emails that I've been getting with questions, that seems like consistent that everyone knew to do. The questions that you have is answering I am ... however you answered those questions. They could be very specific. They could be very generalized. They could have been all personality traits. They could have had some behavioral things. They could have been whatever ended up writing down. The big thing is I did not want you to evaluate them, to think about them while writing them down. I didn't want you to think about them until they were all already down. Now, if you're at that point that you have 20 plus things down, you're at step 2, and that's where you're evaluating them. So for step 2, geez, how much did we get? For step 2, you're going to go one by one through those 20 things, and you evaluate each one. Is this part of myself, or is this part of my self-concept? And you're going one by one, and that simplifies to conscious mind versus unconscious mind, but it's who I really am is in my real self, who I think I am is in the self-concept, and there's a ton of information in the modules for you guys about those things. So if you're not sure about what the self is, the self-concept is, that's not understanding the assignment. That is, you need to go and do a little bit more research. That is, watch the 10-minute personality lecture. That is taking a look at my other live stream potentially. Watching the other videos that I have, the reading through the chapter, looking through the PowerPoint, all of that, and you should have confidence with the self and self-concept. You could also just do internet research on it. Once you're at that point that you have all those 20 things evaluated, and you've been able to say that this is in myself, this is in my self-concept, I would have some alarm not for me, for you. If you look at all 20 things and you say every one of them is in myself, then either you have a bad list. There's 3 options to that. Either you have a bad list, you are in a not great place in your psyche, because that's not a realistic thing to have happen, or you just weren't being very honest as you went through those things in that list. So I guess the fourth option, the fourth thing kind of goes with the first thing. When I say it wasn't a good list, I'm saying you probably had some very basic things that you are, and you didn't really go into any of the real meat and potatoes of your personality and your interests and things like that. I don't think that's going to happen for anyone, but in case it does for the one or two of you that you look at that entire list and you see it seems like your real self is everything there. That's probably something with the list or with how you're evaluating the list, because that's not very realistic. It is more realistic to see everything in the self concept than to see everything in the real self on this list, though I don't think that'll happen for anyone either, because that usually is something that happens when people get to a strenuous point in their mental health. Not necessarily that they're beyond that breaking point, but that they're close to that point where they really do need a little help with their mental health. I doubt that people are going to get into either of the extremes. Most of you are going to probably have some form of a balance. It might be 10 and 10, it might be 5 and 15, thereabouts. It might even be 3 and 17 or something like that. But you'll evaluate each thing one by one, and then you are going to write this paper up. In the paper, the things that I want you to keep in mind when you write the paper are very simple. Number one, this is not a formal paper. You can use I in it. It is reflection based. For some of you, you're going to end up writing it up. It's going to look more like a diary or a journal entry than a paper. It is a self-help exercise that we're doing as a paper, basically. So don't be too concerned about having a formal tone in the paper. Number two, the one big thing that I will be looking at as I grade your paper, it's very simple. I am looking that you understood the self and self concept and are applying the self and self concept. So if all you're doing is talking about your list of 20 things and you're never mentioning the self and self concept, you are not going to do well in the assignment. As long as I see that you are taking each item from your list and you are talking about how it relates to yourself or self concept, that you understood both the self and self concept, so you have things on both sides in your list, that you explain them however needed, but for the most part, that you are applying each item on your list that you talk about to the self or the self concept. That's the two big things. The last thing for you to keep in mind is you do not need to talk about every single one of the 20 things on your list. That is what I really am trying to get at there, is most of you will probably have something on your list that you wouldn't want other people to read about. We all have qualities that we would rather not see in ourselves. And if you have one of those and you have something that you just wouldn't want me to read about, then you can have it on your list for you. You don't have to write about it in the paper for me. And that's really it. So let me summarize this in 2 quick minutes. You were doing 3 things. Number one is the one I think everyone has done successfully now, is write a list of 20 things. I am ... How, as general, specific, as however they come to your mind, personality traits, interests, doesn't matter. Then what you're doing when you write the list is not thinking about them. When they pop into your mind, you write them down. After you get the 20 things down, then you evaluate them. Then you go one by one and you're answering the question, is this in myself or is this in my self-concept? If you need to investigate what the self and self-concept is, that you still need to do that. Step 3 is writing the paper up. Again, paper, informal, use I. It is reflection-based. It is not a formal paper. Don't stress about that. It can look more like a diary or journal entry than a formal paper does. It's informal. I can't stress that enough. And the final thing, what I specifically need to see that you are doing is applying the self and self-concept. So I need to see that you understood the self and self-concept, but that you are applying the self and self-concept to the things on your list. You do not have to use every single one of the 20 plus items on your list. If there's certain ones you would feel more comfortable not talking about or would rather skip, then just skip those. That's fine. Make sure that you get 2 full pages. So it's 2 to 3 page paper. What I mean by that is I want 2 full pages. I don't want 3 lines onto the second page. As long as you give me a 2 full page response and you're applying the self and self concept, you're going to do very well on this. All right, so that's the 2-minute summary. Let me see. I saw, Michelle, you wrote a couple things. Let me see if I just covered them or not. Just answer that. Perfect. 2 pages, but 2 full pages is the big thing that I'm looking for. When I say 2 to 3 pages, I don't mean 3 lines onto the second page is enough. The one thing with this assignment is it's one of those things where the page length for this assignment is really important, because if you are not reaching 2 full pages, then you're not talking enough about this. You're not actually evaluating and reflecting on these things enough. So I'm definitely looking for 2 full pages. So somewhere onto the 3rd page, it could be a line, it could be halfway down, something like that. but 2 full pages. If you wanted to write more, you could, but it's a reflection response. I don't expect to see anyone writing more than 2 pages, a little bit onto the third. Correct, Keith. So it'll simplify to who you think you are versus who you actually are, because uh, how other people see us becomes who we think we are. The bottom line is other people's view of us matter. You might have heard someone say, "I don't care what someone thinks about me. I don't care what anyone thinks about me." Here's the secret of that: they're lying. Everyone cares what other people think about them. They might not care what any specific one person does, but they do care about what someone thinks about them. And most people care about what a lot of people think about them. No one doesn't care about what anyone anywhere thinks about them. That would be a mental health, thing to pay attention to if that was true. That would be a odd overlapping of id and ego. But the end result is people do care what other people think about them. So that means that what someone else thinks about you influences how you view yourself. And that's how you get to that picture of the self concept. If a lot of people value something specific in you, you will start to value that more, even if you didn't normally value that all that much. If every time that you sing, people say, "Wow, you're such a good singer," all of a sudden you're going to, from getting that positive regard over and over again, those pats on the back every time you do it, you're going to start to value singing more. It might not be something that you actually care about, but because you're good at it, it'll start to be a little bit more important to you. You can hate cooking, but you are an amazing cook every time you cook something. People say, "Wow, I need the recipe for that meal." Same idea. If you hear that over and over again, you're going to start to value cooking as part of yourself. And that's going to be part of your self concept. It's not just how others see us, it's how we end up then seeing us because other people see us that way. But just because we see ourselves that way doesn't mean that's who we really are and who we are deep down. Because who we think we are is in our conscious mind, and who we are deep down, that is in our unconscious minds. Some of it overlaps into our consciousness, but not all of it. And that's the difference between the self concept and the real self. It's up to you, Kasha. So when you're doing this, the only thing I would say is don't only have negative things. But when you're doing this, if some negative qualities pop into your mind as you're doing this list, you can write them down. I don't want to say that I usually see a certain way that this works, but I do see enough that I would say there's a common theme that I sometimes see where you get a very small rush of negative qualities that come onto this list. Where maybe that's something that happens when students get to like some writer's block, then all of a sudden some negative traits come. And then it's not something I see all the time by any means. I would say more than half of students only have positive qualities and positive traits that are on this. But I do see fairly often, usually a run of not a lot, but maybe like 3 or 4 consecutive negative things on a list when I actually look at their list. But like I said, I don't collect your list. So whatever you write on that list, if you ended up keeping going past 20 and you ended up looking at your list afterwards and there's, half positive, half negative qualities, that's fine. Still evaluate them all one by one. And remember, you don't have to talk about each one of them. You can pick and choose which ones you talk about in your paper. Ideally, what you're going to see is there's some, the positive qualities will fit more with this paper and what you're doing with this. But what you might see is there's some negative qualities that you have that are things that maybe are part of who you really are, that maybe you hide a little bit from everyone else. So they're part of your ego, not necessarily part of your persona. That's from the PowerPoint for personality. Well, that actually could be that can be a healthy sign. Part of our healthy psyche is that we sweep things under the rug, that we stuff certain things into the closet, that we have our secrets in essence, that we have things that we are working on for ourselves and only for ourselves. So that could actually be a good thing to see if you can evaluate and you can see that you identify a negative quality and it's something that you're working on. You also can see with the negative quality something that relates to self-esteem, where it's something that other people say about you that you end up valuing and you think that you are because you hear from other people. That does not necessarily mean that it's who you really are and part of something that you really care about. Someone can be told that they are. Um, Someone could be told that they are. I'm trying to think of an easier one to talk about. I guess I can't think of an easy one to talk about, but someone can be told that they are conceited over and over and over again, but they don't actually really care that they are. They are a little vain and they're okay with being a little vain. Um, so that could be just completely in their self-concept as well. So positive qualities will fit better with this. They're going to be easier to talk about, but negative qualities can still fit there. If you were doing this with the counselor, when, like I said, this is an exercise that is very commonly done when you are talking to a counselor. That's how you start to really evaluate those negative qualities, and you could really see that can be a very good place to see growth, because you could see things that are only in your self-concept, that you're only hard on yourself because of others, that it can have an impact on your self-esteem, but it's not something that really should be having an impact on your real self. And you can actually get a lot of growth from identifying those things. I don't expect a lot of negative qualities, but I expect that I'll probably see a few. Anybody else have any questions about anything? I guess the real question that I should ask then, for the 4 that are in this chat right now, do any of you guys not understand what to do now for the assignment? Is there a part that I can talk about a little bit more? A specific question that I can answer, or just talking about one of the 3 parts of this again in some detail? Hi, Samantha. Um, okay, so I'll go into the same thing one more time then. Um, so what I'll say before I do go into that, if anyone else in the room right now is completely comfortable with everything, I'm going to go into for 5 minutes now the assignment again for 5-10 minutes. So you're going to hear the same information again. So if you don't have any questions, don't feel that you have to stay for this again. No, not a problem at all, Samantha. Don't feel that you have to stay for this again. If you have no questions, if you feel comfortable, feel free to leave. But the big thing to that is make sure you feel comfortable with the assignment for this week. I know this one, I've been very upfront about this one in my live streams this week. I know this one, because I'm not putting a lot of instructions there, I know that ends up making things harder in some ways for students to really understand. So it's the give and take of, I want things to be open-ended. I don't want to put you into a certain direction, because I won't get the same information from this assignment. I want this to be very open-ended, because then everyone's going to go the different ways that they should for this assignment. But I also understand when you're making an assignment like that, it adds confusion. So that's why I've been talking about this so much all week. Okay, so to the assignments very specifically. There's 3 parts of the assignment. Now, the first part of the assignment, it sounds like everyone understands, and including, I know you had sent me an email that it sounded like you got this part of this. The first part of the assignment is creating this list of 20 things. I am ... However you would answer that list. They can be general or specific. It could be personality traits or interests. It could be positive or negative qualities. Whatever comes to your mind, you write down. But what I mean by that, and I can't stress this part enough, whatever comes to your mind, I don't want you to stop. Something comes into your mind and you think about it. I don't want you to think, should I write this down? If it comes to your mind, I want you to write it down. But that part, I think most of everyone has covered at this point. They have created this list of 20 things, and they're now wondering, what do they do with those 20 things? So step 2. And if you have questions about step 1, Samantha, still, I'll talk about it in as much detail as I need to. But jumping into step 2, because I think that's what I got from that's what I remember from your email, is that this is where you uh, need to have some more information. Step 2 is now, when you wrote step 1, you weren't thinking about each item. Now is when you're going to think about each item. So in step 2, what you're doing is you're going one by one through those 20 or more, whatever, however many you have, items that you have on this list. And you are going to go one by one and answer the question, is this something that I really am? Or is this something that I just think I am? So is this part of my real self, or is this part of my self-concept? Now, the one quick aside here, if you need more information about what the self is and what the self-concept is, that's more research that you have to do. There's research for that everywhere this week. The 10-minute personality lecture that I have goes into the self and self-concept in a decent amount of detail, like 7 or 8 minutes. And that'll help a whole lot to understand. There's information about this in the PowerPoint. You can look at the textbook or even outside internet research. You can look at my previous live stream on Monday, I was talking about it. There is research and information everywhere about the self and self-concept this week. So you have to make sure you understand that for this assignment. You might potentially need to do a little bit more reading for that. The other thing for this week, this has nothing to do with the assignment, but I need you guys to all understand the psychodynamic mind as well this week. So that's the id, ego, and superego. Lots of information about that as well. So you're evaluating now one by one, real self-concept. And you're going into, you might need to think about each item there for a full minute. So this is going to take a little bit of time to get through. Is this part of my real self? Is this just part of my self-concept? Is this something that's in my, that I really care about being? That's part of my real self. Or do I just think I care about it? Why would you just think you care about something? Very simply, because we value the things that other people value in us. There are things in life that you get what's called positive regard. Another thing from the PowerPoint that you get positive regard for. Positive regard are the pats on the back you get from other people. You get them for doing things that they approve of, they respect, that you're good at doing. I can always post the link to my other live stream, because I went into that a little bit more on the Monday live stream, and I can do that again today if you need me to, on this whole idea of what gives us positive regard, what gives us self-actualization. But assuming that we just need to focus more on the self-concept for today, the bottom line is when you get pats on the back from other people, that's saying that they think you're talented at that. You're worthy of their respect, acceptance, praise, affection, whatever it might be. Well, that feels good. And if we get that over and over again, we will start to value the things that we're getting it for. But there's no guarantee that we actually cared about those things. So one of the big secrets of life is a lot of us have heard from probably more than one person that they don't care what people think about them. Here's one of the big secrets of life. They're lying. They do care what other people think about them. Now, they might not care what you specifically think about them or what any one person does, but they do care about what someone somewhere thinks about them. If they didn't, that would be a issue. There's a potential psychological thing to pay attention to there. There could be, I guess I don't really need to get into some of the specifics of that, but there could be some specific things that would be of issue with them if they truly didn't care what anyone thought about them. The bottom line is that we do. Now, some people only care about what the important people in their lives think about them, but a lot of people care about what an average person might think of them. Well, if that's true, then we're going to value their opinions. So then what other people think about us starts to become what we think about ourselves. But the key word here is think. Thinking happens in our conscious mind, and that's what our self-concept is. Our self-concept is in our conscious mind, what we think about us. And the self-concept, when you answer that I am ... that list, it's going to be all things that are at least in your self-concept, but hopefully a good amount of things that are in your real self. The only issue with that list is if everything on your list you think is in your real self, then there's a problem there. That's not very realistic. So you might need to go back and think a little bit more. Maybe you might need to go and add a little bit to your list, because there's either something wrong with the list or how you're evaluating. But back to the point here, the things that we truly care about Well, they're in our real self. A lot of that's in our unconscious mind. Our real self, we're not thinking about every single day. So a lot of that actually hides in our unconscious mind. It trickles into our conscious mind because we have a lot of congruence, we have a lot of overlap in our real self and our self concept. And that's what this exercise is all about. Being able to identify what's in your real self, what's in your self concept. So you're evaluating them one by one. And then after you finish that, you get to step three, and that's when you write the actual response up. Now, there's a couple of things I can't stress enough to keep in mind with writing the response up. Number one, this is an informal paper. What I mean by that, you can use the word I, and for some of you, it might even look more like a diary or journal entry compared to a formal paper. I don't want you to stress of this looking like this formal paper. It is an informal paper. What I'm having you do is take a actual psychological exercise and write a paper about it, but it's reflection based, so it's about you. It's an exercise, so it's definitely something that's going to look informal. Now, I will also say make sure it's 2 full pages, not 2 lines onto the second page. It's a 2 to 3 page paper, meaning I want 2 full pages. This very strongly is an assignment that if you're not going into long enough for this assignment, it just means that you didn't do enough work on this. There wasn't enough effort for it. So I'm looking very much at 2 full pages for this. I don't want to see just 2 lines on there. Then you're just not evaluating enough. But when I'm looking to see with this paper, number one, that it's informal. And the second big thing, what I am going to look for when I grade your paper, I'm looking for one specific thing that you are applying the self and self concept. So, yeah, I need to see that you understood the self and self concept. So there'll be some explanation on that for sure. But what I'm looking for is that you're applying it. So, how are you applying it? You are going to be talking about specific items on your list and how they fit into this yourself or your self concept. So you are going to have things that are some that are in your real self, some that are in your self concept. So I should see that without anything special. I should see you applying both of those. I need to see that you understood self and self concept and that you're applying it. And that's very simply what I need. The third thing that I would mention with the paper is don't feel pressured to talk about every single item on your list. Because of the nature of this exercise, you very possibly might have a few things that you write down on your list of 20 things that you would not want other people to read about, including me. And if you don't want me to read about something on a list, don't talk about that one. You can keep something on your list and it's there for you, but it's not something you're putting about in this paper. I still want you to have that on your list because it's a self-help exercise. It's something that I want you to take something from. So if this is there and you look at that and you want to keep that just for you, by all means, don't feel pressured to talk about every single item on your list. I need to see some that fit into yourself, some that fit into your self concept. I need to see that you can understood and can apply both of those things. But beyond that, if you only talk about 15 things on your list or however many it ends up, as long as you're doing 2 full pages, that's fine with me. Don't feel that you have to copy and paste your entire list onto there. I'm not going to count that you have 20 things on your list that you're including in a list or anything like that. That part is just doing the exercise. And if you have a couple things on the list, especially if you're really writing these things down without evaluating them on your list, you probably will. I have no doubt that if I write that list right now, I'm going to have a lot of things that come into that are things that I wouldn't want other people to know, that I wouldn't want other people to be reading about me. Because there are things with all of our mental health that are there for us and the people that we can really work on this with. Now, that's a different conversation for a different day. I actually do want to make mention to this next week, though. But we can all help one another. We don't need to talk to a professional, a therapist, to do that. But we need to have specific parameters to talk about those real things. If we are talking about those real things with people that we care about, we can talk about those things on our list that we don't want others to see. Because we are all, as human beings, capable of giving something called unconditional positive regard. And I do want to make mention to that. I'll do that next week when things are starting to kind of conclude for the semester. But I do want to make mention to that is we can all give each other unconditional positive regards, which means we can all be each other's, therapist, if you will, be the help that we all need from one another. But unless you're talking to someone that you go into things like that with, you probably are going to see things on that list you don't want to talk about with everyone. Is there anything I forgot to mention with the paper part? I think I covered everything. Yeah. So, do you have any other questions? Anything I didn't cover or I can touch on a little bit more, Samantha? Or anyone in the chat? I don't want to just be only talking to Samantha here. I know a lot of people still hung out for me going over it again. Excellent. Like I said at the beginning of this is it's an assignment. I know when I write an assignment that's this vague, that this is this open ended. I know it means that people are going to get confused because they're going to think I want something more specific than I guess I actually do. Um, but because of how this exercise works, I have to word it open ended because I don't want you to think that you have to write about only one thing or not another thing. I want you to just write what comes to your mind for this. So my purpose is why I have the beginning part of this as open ended as I do. So I apologize for it being a little confusing, but I think it's how this assignment will work as opposed to if I make it more specific, I'm not going to get really good lists. I don't think people. And more than anything, I want you guys to be able to take something out of an assignment like this, especially in a time like this where we're all dealing with our own mental health a little bit right now. Yep, it's completely reflection based, completely informal. I am going to see the word I in everyone's paper a whole lot. I have no doubt. In a formal paper, that would not be okay. This is informal. It's reflection based, so use it as much as you need, Keith. As long as you're not carrying that idea over into the final papers that we have, nothing to worry about. For this paper should not be difficult to write up. The investment in this paper is going to the investment in this paper is going to be more writing that list and evaluating the things on that list. Writing this up is going to be like you were writing a blog. Anybody else have any other questions? Anything I can touch on a little bit more? No, you can skip as much as you want in through your list. You can completely skip over items if there's ones you don't want to talk about. You can go out of order. The However you want to write things up, however it works for you. The only thing I would say when it comes to the order is you might find that the early things on your list are things that are more likely to be in your real self, and the later things on your list are more likely to be things that are just in your self concept. Um, but beyond that, order doesn't matter at all. You might find that the things early on your list are the things that you really describe yourself as, and those are the core parts of who you are. That they're the core parts of who you are. So that might come out first because those might be the first things you jump to. But otherwise, the order doesn't matter. Write about them however you feel comfortable. Can you get the door? I'll make a mention to it. I'm sure they forgive you. I can shut the door behind you if you need. Don't worry about it. Personally, I subscribe to Freud on a whole lot. So I would go Freud personally from just some things that I think he makes a whole lot of sense on. But there's a lot of things that with Freud that you have to take with a grain of salt. There's a whole lot about Sigmund Freud that's not scientific, not proven. Doesn't mean that it's wrong, but you have to take them with a grain of salt. I think that a lot of those things, when it comes to Freud, make sense. So I am definitely more of a believer in Freud than the average person. But yeah, he definitely has some limitations. I always describe him as just saying he was a little bit of an egomaniac. So he believed that he was above proving things with science is how I look at him. But doesn't mean he's wrong. And it doesn't mean by any means that I don't think that Jung has a lot of amazing points in what he has as well. There's a lot of what Jung says that you could see that he worked very closely with Freud and then developed a lot of those beliefs that he had from with Freud as he studied religion more and more and created his own theory. If you didn't hear, my wife apologized for making all the noise before. She's on her lunch break and wanted to take the recycling down, and I think it ended up a lot louder than she thought it was going to be. She kept looking at like pausing. I'm like, just come on, keep going. Hey guys, so I'm going to hang out obviously if you have any questions, but at this point, I don't have anything that I need to add unless you guys have some questions for me or some things that you want to chat about. Like I said before in these, it doesn't have to all be about our class. It can be about quarantine life and things like that. This doesn't always have to be about assignments and things like that. Grades are up. They're up to date for everything, I believe, right now. Next week, we have our final exam, which is just exam 3. It's not like final exam students think, oh, that means it's on the whole class. It's just exam 3. It's not from the beginning of the semester. So it's just going to be on memory, personality, and psychological disorders, which we're covering next week. There's a couple of things I want to chat about in the Wednesday and Thursday live that are more just like takeaways from the class, especially considering maybe I'll do those on Monday, actually, thinking about it, because Wednesday and Thursday we might have more questions about the actual exam. But there's a couple of things that I want to talk about, takeaways from the class that I always like to go over with the full classroom that hopefully we can do just through a live stream for a little bit. And at that point, it's just our final papers. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I think we're just about done for the live stream, but I'm going to hang out for a couple minutes just in case anybody does jot any questions down. I'm going to take a really quick look and make sure I don't have any questions through email that I can address. So I know there's a couple people that pop in and out here that don't have YouTube accounts to ask. It does not look like I have anything. Okay. So if you don't have any other questions, make sure those assignments are in by Friday. Um, I am doing my live streams tomorrow as well. So for the Wednesday class, I can send you an invite if you want to those as well, if as need be. But usually I just send those to my Tuesday and Thursday class. But if I don't see you for the rest of the week, have a good weekend. And soon enough, you might be seeing some things start to open. Probably not for a few more weeks, but at least it seems like we're getting towards the tail end of this, the downswing of everything. The biggest difference on in the days for me is when the weather's nice outside that I can actually go for a walk and enjoy some fresh air and things like that. It's funny because I'm not before all this happened, I'm the kind of person I will go to the gym and get my exercise in. It's not like I go for, walks or runs or anything outside, but I have really started to enjoy just mother nature a little bit and going for, an hour long walk because there's nothing else to do and just enjoying being outside a little bit. I really have. I never used to do that. If I wasn't going outside with intention, so like playing in a baseball game or something, I never would go outside. I always would rather, do my exercise at a gym. So I highly encourage you go outside, breathe in some air. I actually think we saw a planet last night outside. I remember looking at it and thinking, "Are is that a what am I seeing? Is that a star?" And where I am, there's so many lights, we never see the stars at night. And then my wife came in and said, "I think that was a planet. I think she said a Venus was visible or something last night." It's pretty cool. I'm sure that it's having a little bit of an effect. I think the lights usually stop me from seeing the stars, irregardless. I just think that uh, I happen to be able to see, whatever, like a planet or something, because it was brighter. I live in a development that's nothing but lights everywhere. So when I would go to like my in-laws live in the country. So when we go there, we go to that's the country of New Jersey, not like a different state where it's commonplace. to see things. But they live in more rural area of New Jersey, and I could always see the stars there. So I don't know the answer to this area, and that I know I've seen enough that saying we're able to see the stars as a general statement a little bit more. There's less like air pollution in some of the cities and things like that. But do I think that? Do I think that's the reason I could see the planet yesterday? I don't think that. No, I think that was because um, it was just brighter. That I don't know about. That is well outside my area of expertise, Keith. I do like to think that this is giving us something positive. I mean, I know I was reading about the canals in Italy and the being able to see the sky, and I want to say it was in Japan, but it might in somewhere in Asia they could see the sky when they never could before with their air pollution or whatever it is. I like to think that we're seeing something positive about that. I don't want to think that that's changing everything. I know, like the ice caps are still melting and the temperature of the ocean still rising. So I don't think this is you know the solve to these crises. But I like to think that there's something positive that's happening from from this. And to me, like if that is the positive, at least it's cool being able to see the canals in Italy and things like that. Something little. When I go outside, it feels like the air smells cleaner, but I'm sure that's completely in my own head. That's just in my own mind. It does make sense that I think I smell it being cleaner. I don't know, but that it is a little bit cleaner certainly does make sense. All right. See you next time, Keith. Tomorrow or next week. Actually, looking at the time, I've been live for an hour now, so it's probably a good time for me to end the stream here. If you have any questions, shoot me emails, and we can always cover them one by one. Everyone's welcome to stop into the live stream tomorrow, and otherwise, I will see you guys next week.